Szanowni Państwo, rozpoczynamy
Ladies and gentlemen, let us start the second session with a little delay because of some technical problems. Here we have two presentations in this part. The host will give way to the guests. That's why we will start with the presentation of Robert Pyka of Katowice, culture as a source of the city resilience, using the example of the former of the former network of creative cities. Why this long title? Okay, Robert Pyka once again, the Faculty of Sociology, University of Katowice. I will give you a different answer. You won't see any tables and diagrams. This will be a talk about certain trajectories of two cities cooperating with each other from 2004, and this long-term observation that I have conducted could be a basis of a reliable research project that have been presented here, but this is just ahead of us. Apart from my academia work, for 14 years I have been conducting an institution that develops the cooperation between Katowice and Saint-Étienne, between those partner cities, and throughout the years and through formal conversations with the managements of the cities and observing the path of development, I want to share this with you. I want to share the observations on the trajectories of those two cities. So we will be talking about two cities, about Katowice and Saint-Étienne. Since there is a time limit on my speech, I will be talking about Saint-Étienne mainly because Katowice, this is better known to you. The theoretical context that I place my contribution is the notion of resilience of the city. Of course, this is placed in a wide context of the complexity that is growing when a global market is being created. There is a certain volatility, and we are looking for new paths for development, and a certain inflation of conceptions, of concepts, is what accompanies the process. The cities should be vital, intelligent, learning, pulsing, that's a very popular term nowadays, and creative. But the fact is that the concepts, what is characteristic of those is that they are post-thought. I mean, they create on the human capital, creativity, culture, and so on, and they are territorial in their nature as well. We know that it is not possible to steer the development from Warsaw. The factors determining the development are at the local level, and the city that is the natural habitat of the life of the human being in the 21st century. The common element of those concepts, looking for new paths of development, is the attempt to create a city that will be resistant to the changing environment and resistance to the changing inner substance. I will not dwell upon resilience because this can be encountered in two different variants. There are many definitions, but let me mention two approaches. The approach of balance. After a certain crisis, the city comes back to the previous path of development, and the evolutionary approach, which assumes that through the reconfiguration of the internal factors of development, we are able to change the trajectory, the path of development, and we may even reach better results than those before the crisis. When watching the evolution of the notion, you can see that it stops to be only dedicated to cities in crisis. The changing environment, the dynamism of economic processes means that we have to deal with a permanent crisis. This is not a crisis, really. This is an immanently inscribed phenomenon in the contemporary reality. So the resilience is a feature that the city should actually have in its DNA, as the ability to permanently renew itself and to renew its social and economic base for the development, to keep the competition edge on the global market. Two elements: the imperative of the economic efficacy, which is getting more and more important, and also the sustainability of life and the quality of life. It seems also in the context that the culture is a very good link, which allows you to connect those two seemingly contrary imperatives But the basis of this all is the human being. So in terms of the relation between culture and economy, I don't want to, I mean, the image, the architecture and so on, I don't want to elaborate on it, but I want to focus myself on the relation between the culture and the economic development. There is a lot of literature. When going through it, I think we can actually see some basic models, how cities base their development on culture. There are certain models. This is, however, not a final classification. There is a lot of more models. The conventional model, which assumes a functional takeover of the culture as a branch of development, of economic development, and out of this deficit character, it becomes yet another branch of industry, and this is followed by projects of reconfiguring the city centers to create flagship cultural objects, to organize big events, it's about striving to be adopted, to be accepted by international networks, to get international recognition. Another model that you can discern, it is discredited to some extent. This is the creative model. The foundation, the cultural foundation and the economic foundation assumes that you attract creative people, having a lot of cultural, social, cultural capital, and the city becomes a space of consumption, but also of co-creation of immaterial values by homo creativus. The third model is the culture cluster model. The focal point is from the individuals onto the environment. We try to create certain conditions for the ecosystem that should support the development. Regardless of that, there are many more models. But what we are observing in the international documents, you can also find it, and I will quote some key examples. The culture, is gaining momentum, is gaining value. Its role in creating economic development is underscored, particularly in cities where there is a deficit of external resources. I can refer to the report of UNESCO Culture Urban Future, and this report had some impact on the new agenda of the city of Katowice, adopted in 2016. The culture and founding the development of the city on culture connects with creativity, of course. When this is an individual feature, but when talking about the city, I mean the creativity is a certain common process, it's a collective process. One of the definitions of the creative city says that creative cities are there when the cultural and economic diversity allows themselves to confront their ideas, to produce new connections, new links, and to expose them to social evaluation, hoping that some of them will be accepted. So creativity and culture have a lot to do with metropolis. Metropolis are places where we have to deal with an agglomeration of certain potentials of actors of the world of art and economy and politics. So this networking phenomenon is best reached in agglomerations. This is done at two levels: at the external level, metropolitan governance or collaborative governance. I don't want to talk about this today. I know this is not an automatic process. It's not enough that the actors are gathered at one location. There are many conditions to be met for the cooperation to emerge. I quoting the example of Azela Iglasha, who define several conditions that have to be met: trust, common trust, balance of power, institutional architecture. This is key. But what I want to say is the external networking, certain practices connected with looking for the resources outside, in networks, in international networks. And as an example, I would like to quote the network of creative cities of UNESCO created in 2004. ECC and two cities that I want to dwell upon. These are the cities that wanted to gain the title of ECC. So being accepted to the creative network of UNESCO was not a substitute, but it was a way how to manage the energy that was released. And this is an attempt to channel the energy in a different form. We didn't talk yesterday about Katowice, but the ECC effect is also visible there very strongly. In December last year, Katowice became the creative city in terms of music, in the area of music. And here I want to go over to the city, to this telltale about the city. Why the partnership between Katowice and Saint-Étienne? Well, there is mining industry, there is Polish soul, which is present there. Saint-Étienne was a superpower in the 19th century. That was one of the biggest industrial centers in France. This was an armament, weapon city. 90% of weapons were produced there. Also, the first bicycles were produced there. In Ondel, there was the first company that shipped their goods to the customers via mail. The first railway was established there between Saint-Étienne and Andrézieux for the transportation of raw materials, the first one in Europe after England. I remember when I was there, they showed me clips from the beginning of the 20th century. Kids from Lyon went on trips to Saint-Étienne to see a big city. Today, it's exactly the other way around. So the competences, this enormous power, there are examples. These are the examples and the main competences: armaments industry, bicycles, the technology, innovation, and a very high precision of the production. This is falling down in the beginning of the 20th century. Many France is closed, mining industry is closed. The city loses a lot of businesses and a lot of residents. This power comes to an end, and Saint-Étienne enters a period of a very deep crisis. And what did they want to do about it? The process was accompanied by a long reflection. It was not overnight. They attempted to find a path of development that would refer to the competencies that had always been there, but at the same time, this was transfer the city into the 21st century. Design, or industrial design, was what they went for. So the competencies that had been there in Saint-Étienne for many dozens of years, they attempted to reshape them, to give them a new dimension in the activity connected with the production of designer, ergonomic, new products. Manifrance, the former armament factory, was transformed into a design center. The Academy of Fine Arts was transferred there, and for several years recently, this is a very industrial design. I prefer to call it industrial design. This know-how, a certain ethos connected with it, was given a new dimension. For many years, biennales of design have been organized in Saint-Étienne. This year's exhibition was devoted to the evolution of work in the life of man. This year, what you can see, that these are solar panels with petals of flowers developing and then hiding away when it's dark. But what I want to show, Saint-Étienne has been able to build a new path of development based on culture, based on creativity, combining this with the former competences of the city. These are factory spaces that have been transformed into spaces of creativity. And Saint-Étienne got international acclaim through this. Saint-Étienne is not a big city, it's just 170,000 inhabitants, but they are to be found among other creative cities, 22 in total, Montreal, Seoul included, and other significant cities, and Saint-Étienne was awarded a prize in Katowice. Saint-Étienne and the industrial design is not only the center of design, the city applied culture as an element of its development. This is a logic of operation of the city government. There is a design manager in the mayor's office of Saint-Étienne. These are the examples of transforming the public space with the participation of the residents, living up with the participation of residents, of the designers, and with the participation of local governments, municipal government. This is a fantastic a presentation of how you can combine the past with the future. These are nails. This refers you back to the past. And other examples showing, oh, sorry, I'm jumping over, but a big focal point is the participation. And questions have been asked about this this morning. During the biennial, they have laboratories testing, placing different objects in public space and watching people, how they react. I have to accelerate, unfortunately. And ladies and gentlemen, this is connected also with the process of metropolization. I deal with the process because this means that you need to gather a certain capital in a limited space. If you don't have enough capital within the limits of the city, we try to expand the city in order to reach the critical mass. In the case of Saint-Étienne, this is done by integration with the adjacent municipalities, over 50 municipalities. This creates Metropole Saint-Étienne. Well, this is only a metropolis by name because the metropolis don't have to call themselves metropolis because they are metropolis. But it's not a question. The design is being sort of distributed, dispersed. It's about the logic of creating the design all around culture. So this goes out. This is being distributed in all the other neighborhoods of the city. And now just one word about Katowice. I don't have time enough for it. There is a city conference next week in Katowice. Maybe some of you will visit, and there is a metropolis session on the program. The path was similar. Katowice didn't get the title of the ECC, but the process of application changed a lot the mode of operation in culture. This is the city of the gardens. This institution has taken over the cultural functions of the city. Several employees of this institution were taken over into this city of gardens, and another object that will be sort of sucked up is the cultural department of the city government. I think many people there are inclined to go over to this institution. So this is a classical model, the creation of big objects, big events, being accepted to networks, the city as a living room. I don't have these examples yet, but this is another stage, and we want to learn this from Saint-Étienne. The first results can be seen next year. Katowice will host a global meeting of all the creative cities worldwide, over 100, and at the end of 2018 there will be the climate summit in Katowice. So I think the application of the first model is bringing fruit. At the end, I want just to pose a question or to voice a doubt, coming back to the theoretical thread from the beginning of my presentation. That's about the role of the culture. How do we approach the culture? Of course, this is not a clear question. I mean, it can be understood in many ways. Do we have, with a situation where culture is getting recognized again, does it support economic development, or I'm using the notion of Luhmann, the political inclusion, or maybe we have to deal with a economic inclusion and instrumentalist approach to culture, which is a pretext to generate the mainstream development. Somebody said yesterday that certain objects of culture that have been built, but they are not used. It doesn't actually mean anything because we then can place businesses there. So this is just about the development of infrastructure, and this inscribes very well into the economic model of the city, new liberal model. And the concept that is emerging out of it is the post-creative city. Thank you very much. Thank you. We will now give the floor over to the hosts, Kamila Kamińska and Agnieszka Wiszczerska. The floor is yours. So what is your topic? And I have a tool of oppression. I will press upon you just to leave more time for a discussion. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Now, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me fire this, or are you doing that? I'm not. Yesterday, I took part, as much as you did, in the debate on the city and the culture in the city. What Agnieszka and I are going to present you, it's part of the process that we developed due to the invitation that we got from Kamila Janek and Jacek Pluta. And it's part of our report. Obviously, you have access to the report, and there are summaries of the report available in the publication. We'd like to focus on one of the aspects that were the object of our study. Agnieszka Wieszczawska is writing a doctorate thesis, and I am a lecturer in the Institute of Pedagogy. We also had some contributions from some other students, so there was a team working on the report. In order to give it a title for the purpose of this conference and not to report on the report that has been prepared, we thought of one of the aspects that we believe is quite important also in the context of the debate that we started. The evaluation for us was to check the delivery and deliverables. We wanted to check AIR, Artist in Residence program, which we believe is pretty important. And we picked up three main objectives. The objectives identified in the resolution on the European Capital of Culture. One of the objectives was the European dimension. Therefore, the title that you can see on the slide, Europe and its invisible or visible presence in Artists in Residence program. As a result of our survey, in the narrative part and in questionnaires, we were trying to find the answer to the question, what is Europe for the participants? We arranged for more than 1 hour narrative questionnaires, and we asked the question, what does Europe mean and what values are there incorporated in Europe? And there were questions about networking in the course of the residence, of what you learned, what you were learning. What is Europe to you was answered with, well, very much backing off response. We talked to artists, we talked to members of the staff in the office, and we talked to people who professionally arrange for residences with BWA and the Project Mine, people who professionally deal with Europe. It's not that they don't know what Europe meant to them. It was also at the emotional level. This is a question that evokes emotions and in a way become speechless, or we lose the language we want to use talking about something important. Well, everybody knows, that was the answer, everybody knows about it, that's pretty obvious. I'm not going to repeat the obvious. Agnieszka will report on the results. Now, what we noticed, and that was at the time during a almost an acute phase of the migration crisis, and we were running this survey. There were a number of debates held across Europe, and the situation in Poland was changing. You could see a picture of Madrid. It's the city hall. I got off 12 midnight, commuted by coach to the center of Madrid, and refugees welcome. That was on the City Hall building, and this is what Europe was at that time. And this is Banksy's work, a very typical communicational message. This site contains blocked messages by Banksy, and it seemed so. When I started talking to someone, I had to beg them to tell me what they meant in terms of values, Europe and values. So only then they would say it's freedom, it's human rights. You had to corner the participants of the questionnaire. I was trying to encourage them, prompt them. We seem not to be able to talk about the most important things, and we could feel that the narrative was subject to auto-censorship. Then the role of the artist. There was a question about the role of the artist. We also could take it out of those interviews. Artists were speaking about a huge responsibility that they feel. But being explicit about art or Europe, straightforward, they didn't seem it was done. It did not become them. Agnieszka, now the methodology, just to introduce you to the context of the survey. It is just brief. I believe I'm subject to some repression in terms of time discipline. As Kamila has already said, we wanted this sample to be as diversified as possible, and we ran interviews with artists who would go abroad to residences as residents, and we also interviewed visiting artists, and we interviewed people who were responsible for the arrangements, organization of the whole thing. And there were also social, cooperative, and non-government organizations who were empowered and actually did carry out the program. Now, the paradigm, qualitative methods, that was our choice. Now, you can see part of the famous Guernica by Picasso, painted as an act of objection against the attack on the city in 1937. So what is the role of the artist faced with the problems that Europe is facing? And that's what we're trying to ask and to find out from the artists. Now, the role of the artist was also present in some other dimensions. We touched on the dimension of learning. And That was the second dimension, learning in residences. There were three branches or subcategories: sources, types, and contents in terms of learning. So the European dimension was there. It was present in each category each category that was linked or connected in practice. We split them or divided them in order to be able to structure the whole thing. Learning in the course of artistic action or activity in order to involve people. So it was learning Europe. I believe that was one of the main guiding themes, or main themes. What we could see, that was to much extent, in order to structure the study. You can see the most important problems in those interviews or talks about art and artistic activities. Number one, the role of the artist in today's world. And down, as you can see at the bottom, the European world touched or affected by the crisis and the European values. Sooner or later, we could see them reflected or hear them reflected in the narrative. Can we move on to what was the strongest, the signs of crisis, concern and worry, and anxiety, uncertainty? I believe that this situation is very complex. I am afraid of that. I don't know when the things are heading for. I don't think Europe is coping. I don't think there is an idea or concept how to resolve the situation. So there are strong words: anxiety, fear, uncertainty, the unknown. I don't know where it is heading to. Everything is trembling and staggering. That's what people would say. And we are facing uncertainty. And then we can see the artist and his or her role. It was very exciting to have discovered, from my point of view, how the artists and how the artists described the role of art in an uncertain world. One of the artists said that pure aesthetics should not be the object of her activity, because there are so many needs to be catered for in terms of ad hoc interventions. In her view, the pure aesthetics should wait until the world becomes fully democratic. And some of the artists would see like, what I saw, what really struck me when I was reading the narratives. And on one hand, we use big words: democracy, freedom, tolerance, equality, and a great number of those artistic interventions were small-scale interventions, locally, focusing on the local, and on many occasions person responsible for this type of activity would deny the artistic aspect of it. There was a pavilion built by one of the residents, and that pavilion or that hut was transported to a camping ground. There's another thing, a revolution in Zacisze. The revolution in Zacisze was not meant to be actually a revolution. They just wanted to gather a couple of neighbors who live there and just ask them, invite them, and maybe initiate some friendships. Those people have beautiful gardens, and they could use the gardens, they could meet. So they have one more meeting. There was a follow-up meeting. Zacisze is a residential district and sort of upmarket districts, one of houses in the garden district, a garden suburb. We wanted to achieve our objective through the artists wanted to achieve their objectives through micro tasks. And if we can do that through those micro tasks, the whole vocabulary and the language will come back to us, because fear and uncertainty are as oceans, and small interventions were really a response, or perhaps a method to resolve the problems or the issues mentioned by the respondents. You can see the old mine residents, Anna Skubisz of Wałbrzych. They were making felt statues. We could see them sew the statues, the sculptures of felt became an expression of an important value. And we could see that in interviews, or read that in interviews, when people in the first contact was a bit of withdrawn. But then, when they opened, they spoke about tenderness, about intimacy and love. And I believe these sculptures, being so warm, relate to that topic. Now, this one comes from Szczecin. I think this can be related to the class by Burger, the first residence, back to year 2015. And that was the name of the title. What if we act if there were future ahead of us? And that was his way of initiating the debate. He focused over the gypsy camp, Roma camp. He wanted to see how people perceive the camp from a balcony, and he could appreciate the dimension or the scale of the drama, the tragedy taking part there. In his and my understanding, he simply drew what if we all act if there was a future. He drew some conclusions for Europe. Well, thank you very much. I think we have time for questions, debate to the presenters. We've been given so many facts. a plethora of facts, as a matter of fact. Anyone would like to ask a question?
Naprawdę nikt?
No one?
Jasne?
Everything's clear?
No to zostało nam jakieś 5
So
minut.
we have 5 minutes.
Powiedzcie,
Share the 5 minutes and try to say what you wanted to say, but you failed to. Now we have Wałbrzych, and we'd like to listen to Katowice, and Katowice has been quite so let me pass the microphone over and about Katowice. Very briefly. Now, I'd like to continue the theme. Yesterday I was listening to the impact, the effects of OC. In Katowice, we did not run any evaluation. We didn't get the opportunity. So, well, in the network of creative cities, it's too early because I believe the impact is visible, tangible. There was a very small team preparing the bidding document, the application, and then the same team prepared the application for the UNESCO project. The institution that seemed originally very stagnant, the Krystyna Bochenek Katowice Cultural Center, very stable, conservative institution, was taken over by the City of Gardens. I think the phase that we are in is related to the need to we are in a transition phase, and I do invite you to visit the building. We have the audio system, I believe, from Japan, and the building is absolutely impressive. Now, our collaboration with Saint-Étienne, the cities learn from each other as partners. It's very important to reach to residents. I believe Muzykodrom is one of the greatest projects. You show to children that music is present everywhere. If the city it's not about concert in Nospra only. It's somehow encouraging creativity from the bottom to going upward. But back to Saint-Étienne and their very different problem, being multicultural with refugees. We have to approach people with so different codes. We meet those people in the shop when we do morning shopping, or when we meet other parents in school meetings. It's fascinating to see how culture has been used in order to create social ties. They develop a program, and we would like to have it implemented in Katowice. They've been doing that in Saint-Étienne. The project is about each child at school being able to touch a musical instrument or even take it home. It's not about teaching and talents, identifying talents in the competition. The fact of handing an instrument, a musical instrument, over to a child is part of the process where we build trust and ties. I asked a question to the project director. I asked him about the condition in which the instruments are returned. And he says, well, they don't get damaged. children take instruments home, they try them out at home, and there's some sort of trust between the institution and individuals. They return them intact, and this is the important thing. This is how we do it via culture. There must be some future.